Courtroom 17B usually feels like a mausoleum in gray polyester, a place where fluorescent lights hum over paperwork thick enough to bruise a desk clerk's wrists. On the morning Wendy Williams took the stand, the atmosphere switched from bureaucratic to volcanic. There was no red carpet, no studio applause sign, yet everyone present could sense the precision timing of television. Security radios crackled, laptops snapped open, reporters adjusted ring lights to grab whatever signal might leak from the sixth-floor Wi-Fi. The previous 5 days of testimony against Diddy Combs had already supplied whispers of secret soirées and non-disclosure agreements, but most of it landed like background static, until the talk show queen, with the diamond-encrusted microphone voice, stepped through the double doors in a monochrome trench coat sharp enough to draw blood. She moved without an entourage, a detail that sent several veteran columnists into immediate, slack-jawed silence. For decades, Wendy Williams had been a magnet for executive assistants juggling her coffee orders and crisis calls. That she arrived alone suggested one of two things. Either her allies were in short supply, or she was about to torch every remaining bridge on her own. The bailiff pronounced her name, and a tremor of camera shutters clicked even though federal court rules ban photography. Old habits die loud. Wendy raised her right hand, nails sculpted into glossy talons that caught the overhead glare like tiny solar panels, and swore to tell the whole truth. She pressed her other palm flat on a heavy Bible that looked suddenly fragile under the weight of incoming testimony. The prosecutor opened with a single neutral inquiry. "Please state your occupation." Wendy offered a sly smile. "Former radio host, former daytime talk host, full-time truth trafficker." A ripple of laughter tried to break across the benches, but tension strangled at mid-gasp. The judge nodded for counsel to proceed, though her pen hovered as if expecting the transcript itself might burst into flames. "Wendy, usted no se hables." She said Sean Combs didn't run parties. He ran rituals. She described catered midnights inside gated mansions where unsmiling staffers collected cell phones in velvet bags, where intravenous drips stood next to trays of vintage champagne, and where guests were herded into color-coded corridors. Blue lights for conversation, red lights for consensual exploration, black lights for what she called the contracts nobody remembers signing. Each door, she claimed, had its own medical monitor station outside, clipboard in hand, ensuring nobody collapsed until paperwork shielded the host from liability. She cited one particular spring evening when a private security medic replaced half a guest list hangovers with for saline long before dawn. Invoices were later labeled wellness services and routed through Shell LLCs based in Delaware. She knew, she said, because a junior accountant at one of those Shell firms sent her the line items trying to sell the story, then vanished from industry email directories 2 days later. Defense counsel objected to relevance before the gallery could process the mental visuals, but the judge glanced at the sealed exhibits and ruled the details foundational. Wendy leaned into the microphone as if she were back in her Manhattan studio, sliding a rumor across the airwaves. "The public calls it partying," she said. "Inside the circle, it's a production pipeline. The content is human compliance. The export is silence." Her delivery sliced each consonant. She didn't need to raise volume. The hush around her did the amplification. She shifted focus to Jay-Z and Foxy Brown. It wasn't the first time those names had collided in tabloid paragraphs, but nobody had spelled out the math on a government transcript. Jay-Z, 27. Foxy, 15. Wendy explained that she'd reported the age gap on her radio show back in the 90s, only to find her sponsor slots evaporating 3 weeks later. An executive at the station spelled it out on a Friday call. "You want to keep a job? Stop poking that hive." The following Monday, she was off air. "They said I violated community standards," Wendy told the judge. "Whose community?" "The community of men who write the checks." Her side-eye landed like a searchlight across the defense table. The judge requested specificity about retaliation. Wendy produced a packet of termination letters, all citing vague misconduct, all issued within 90 days of segments mentioning Jay-Z's relationship with a minor. She flipped to a timeline chart color-coded in neon. Green for episode air dates, red for corporate thread emails, black for canceled advertising deals. The prosecutor asked the court to admit the chart. Defense tried to argue foundation again, but this time the jury's eyebrows seemed to vote yes before the judge could. The exhibit went in. Cassie Ventura's name surfaced next. The young singer once hailed as an overnight sensation who never seemed free of Diddy's gravitational pull. Wendy described interviewing Cassie at age 19. A radiant talent accompanied by handlers who hovered too close, who answered half the questions for her, who frowned whenever Cassie's gaze drifted anywhere but her boyfriend boss. When he told the jury she'd seen stars sparkle under studio lights for decades, but had never seen eyes that frightened. She aired those concerns on her show, that Cassie looked trapped behind a gold leaf cage, only to receive a cease and desist letter the next morning claiming defamation and interference with protected relationships. The letter arrived on stationery from the law office Diddy's team still retains. The host kept a copy. The envelope is now an evidence sticker in a federal folder. At this point, spectators no longer checked their phones for tweets. They feared missing micro-expressions on the defendant's face. Diddy's jaw tightened like a bolt under too much torque. He scribbled notes, pushed them toward counsel, fidgeted with the knot of his tie as though it might turn serpent and strike. Wendy pivoted to Oprah Winfrey. She said that in 2003, while preparing to guest on Oprah's legendary couch, she confided that her ex-husband's colleague had sexually harassed her early in her career. Oprah promised, woman to woman, not to parade the abuser for ratings. 7 years later, Wendy watched the same man stroll across Oprah's stage to promote a memoir. The segment played directly after a commercial block sponsored by a multinational beverage brand whose board included an executive who also invested in one of Diddy's spirits ventures. Connect the dots, Wendy told the courtroom. The ink spells dollars, and the punctuation is fear. Defense sprang up again, objecting to Oprah's absence from the indictment. The prosecutor countered that pattern and motive were central. If a celebrity empire helped shield misconduct for profit, that context mattered. The judge agreed. Tyler Perry entered the narrative via whispered phone calls and quiet ultimatums. Wendy alleged that Perry's team approached her producers twice with an offer: a syndicated television comeback for Wendy, full national carriage, high six-figure salary, on condition she signed a non-disparagement clause encompassing Perry, Winfrey, and affiliated third parties. Affiliated, Wendy said, was euphemism of the century. She declined the offer, and that phone pitch was never mentioned again. She produced email logs with subject lines reading opportunity draft, full silence clause. Defense shouted relevance a third time. The judge overruled with a sigh that implied future objections needed fresh vocabulary. Then came the payload: a chain of emails between an ultra-luxury hotel group and a private events firm controlling VIP suites during the 2019 Grammy weekend. One message labeled confidential, client ultimate listed demands: gowns piped to order for female guests, robe-only dress code for indoor pool level, blackout drapes sewn shut, secondary Wi-Fi network with rolling encryption, medical staff on 24-hour call, and standard NDA kit, digital/print. The client code name inside the document corresponded to an alias investigators had previously tied to Diddy's corporate retainer. Wendy testified she obtained the email from a whistleblower concierge who was fired for breach of loyalty after asking why ambulances idled behind the service entrance all night with nobody admitted to the ER. The concierge remains out of state. The prosecution said they are in protective witness talks. Court stenographers flew across keys, trying to keep up. Reporters scribbled so hard pens broke mid-sentence. The jury alternated between notepads and thousand-yard stares. Wendy's cadence never faltered. She delivered names, dates, and dollar figures as if reading grocery lists. $10,000 to keep paramedics on standby, $20,000 for custom blackout drapes, $2 million in hush retainers spread across 8 NDA recipients over 3 years. She cited a memo referencing IV therapy preference, vitamin B12, glutathione, electrolyte replenish, and asked aloud why exactly networking required hospital-grade vitamin bags. Nobody answered. She revealed a second memo showing how a major streaming service proposed sponsoring a reality series documenting Diddy's legendary nightlife, conditional on full editorial veto by Combs Enterprises. The show collapsed weeks after Wendy teased investigative material on her YouTube channel. She displayed a calendar slide. Her teaser posted on a Thursday. The streaming contract terminated on the following Monday, citing creative differences. The same Monday, her channel received 3 copyright strikes over unrelated archival clips, effectively shutting down ad revenue. All 3 strikes traced back to companies with partial ownership by the same venture fund as Combs's Revolt Network. Coincidence, she suggested, was just an alias for orchestration. Near the midpoint of her testimony, Wendy paused only long enough to sip water, then delivered a line that ricocheted through every live blog. This is not the fall of one man. It's the demolition of an entire hush economy. She pointed out that for 20 years tabloids labeled her unhinged for repeating rumors. Today, each rumor sat in an evidence binder wearing a federal exhibit sticker. She described private voicemails from studio executives instructing her to stop riling up the culture, then played one 30-second clip in open court. A muffled male voice saying, "You'll be back on daytime the second you quit swinging at family." The jury looked puzzled until she clarified. In the parlance of power, family meant the ecosystem. Music moguls, film distributors, philanthropic titans whose public images weave into a Kevlar vest, shielding every shareholder from fallout. She said the ecosystem polices itself by starving dissenters of oxygen, talent, and time slots. Cassie's story returned when the prosecutor laid out a graphic timeline of her relationship with Diddy. Signed at 19, contractual tie-ins with multiple Combs subsidiaries, home address listed as property controlled by Combs's LLC, security staff paid directly by the same LLC. Wendy outlined how Cassie's first single soared to radio rotation only after she appeared on an access-granted episode praising Diddy's mentorship. Meanwhile, Cassie's travel schedule mirrored his exactly. No independent tour dates, no unsupervised press. Wendy equated it to corporate guardianship masquerading as romance. He turned a label deal into a custody agreement, she said. The phrase landed like a gavel. The prosecutor asked Wendy how she acquired internal label memos. She said artists who left Bad Boy quietly fed her breadcrumbs for years, trading anonymity for exposure. She never revealed a source on air until now, presenting the court with sworn affidavits from 3 former staffers who claimed their exit severance included NDA clauses forbidding mention of bedroom logistics, medical interventions, or unlicensed security operations. The affidavits, delivered under seal, maintained that refusal to sign meant forfeiting final paychecks and health insurance continuation. Defense counsel scribbled notes, apparently preparing cross-examination on breaching confidentiality, but the optics already skewed, NDAs being used as gag orders, not business protections. When the afternoon recess ended, Wendy walked back into the witness box with a stack of paper thick enough to shim a wobbly table. She explained it was a master timeline she created. 13 single-space pages connecting party guest lists, hotel invoices, entertainment news retractions, and sudden sponsorship withdrawals from her show. She ran a fingertip-down highlighted entries. January 10th, investigate a monologue on radio. January 18th, local advertiser pulls a $250,000 contract. January 22nd, email from Combs associate referencing radio pest. She followed the breadcrumbs for 15 years until the pattern proved itself like a polynomial equation. The judge sighed again, admitted the document in full, and told counsel to stay hydrated because redirect will be extensive. Defense finally cross-examined. They tried rebranding Wendy as a disgruntled host craving spotlight after her health hiatus. She answered by listing the surgeries that nearly killed her, concluding, "I am held together with screws and transparency." They suggested memory degradation. She recited phone numbers of defendants' former assistants from a decade ago. They floated payoffs for sensationalism. She replied by reading a text from an anonymous entertainment attorney offering her a primetime production deal if she would bury petty narratives. That text, timestamped 2 weeks before trial, ended with a smiley face emoji and a wire transfer promise. Jurors leaned forward, necks craning like sunflowers. The final stretch of testimony revolved around the cost of speaking out. Wendy quoted budget lines from potential sponsors who retracted six-figure offers. She described arriving at network meetings to find her parking pass revoked because room capacity reached, while boardroom blinds clearly framed empty chairs. She told the jury she once calculated lost earnings north of $30 million. Asked why keep pushing, she delivered the sentence that will likely anchor every documentary. I would rather be penniless with receipts than priceless with secrets. Even the judge looked up from the bench at that. Prosecutors closed by asking Wendy to clarify the systemic nature of the alleged cover-up. She responded that Diddy is not a glitch. He is a flagship product of a system where NDAs operate as digital guillotines and philanthropy buys public benefit of the doubt. She said Jay-Z's empire grew alongside a narrative vacuum about Foxy Brown. Oprah's empire expanded on feel-good storytelling, while inconvenient survivors were sidelined. Tyler Perry shipped billion-dollar morality tales, while lawyers threatened the livelihoods of critics mentioning his name near Diddy's. They share PR firms, they share attorneys, they share silence, she said. Every handshake is a non-compete agreement on truth. Her closing words hung sharp and slow. They call me crazy, vindictive, messy. Choose your adjective. I call myself archived. She tapped the microphone twice, a broadcaster's code for signal clarity, then stepped down. The court clerk recorded adjournment, but the mood suggested no one present was ready to exit the alternate reality Wendy unveiled. Outside the courthouse, primetime anchors scrambled to rewrite scripts. Inside Hollywood's high-rise offices, assistants surely rewound voicemail greetings to scrub references that might age poorly by midnight. The jury returns tomorrow to absorb a digital forensics expert who will authenticate Wendy's email cache. Defense will attempt to reroute blame onto rogue employees turned informants. Meanwhile, every publicist from West LA to Tribeca is updating crisis management decks to account for a talk show host who brought a binder of skeleton keys. Industry headlines troll for the phrase "hush economy," and blog editors sharpen op-eds predicting which titan's public image tumbles next. The chain reaction has already begun. A beverage conglomerate quietly pulled its ads from Combs Associated Podcast. A streaming giant postponed a biopic exploring Jay-Z's early life. A charitable foundation linked to Oprah announced an internal review of board affiliations without naming the catalyst. What happens next hinges on metadata, depositions, and whether or how quickly more insiders elect to breach their NDAs in exchange for immunity. But certain facts are already carved into the public imagination in capital letters. A reputed media assassin dropped decades of receipts under oath. The defendant's poker face cracked. The supporting cast of cultural icons found themselves named on record. No social media blackout can unwrite sworn testimony, and no brand partnership can bleach evidence stickers off hotel email chains. The industry built walls of money and myth thick enough to smother grievances for a generation. Yet the blueprint never accounted for a time when the walls themselves would be logged, cataloged, and read aloud in a federal script. When he walked out of Courtroom 17B precisely as she walked in, alone, head unbowed, trench coat slicing the hallway hush. She ignored the barrage of microphones, pausing only to share one line with a court reporter who asked how she felt. "Lighter," she said, then added without breaking stride, "and ready for syndication if the universe has airtime." The automatic doors whooshed open into Los Angeles sunlight, and the woman once vilified for stirring rumor left behind a record bigger than rumor, bigger than ratings. An affidavit of an era where speaking costs millions, but silence costs souls. Even if Sean Combs walks free on procedural grounds, even if NDAs ultimately muzzle half the witness list, the story has already metastasized beyond any single verdict. A hush economy can survive lawsuits. It struggles against broadband. This time the mic stayed hot long enough for the archive to speak, and the world watched the waveform in real time.